Okay, this is the last podcast for Standard 2.1b, and this one is on active transport. So in the previous podcast, we talked about passive transport, which is when molecules are going to move from a high concentration to a low concentration, and that movement does not take any energy. And remember, that's because molecules are in constant motion, and they want to be where they're going to have the most amount of room to move around. But sometimes cells need molecules to move to where they don't want them to go, and so in those cases, they are going to use active transport to make that happen. So in active transport, the cell has to actually use energy in order to make this happen. That energy is in the form of ATP. And we are going to actively move molecules to where they are needed. So it may not be where the molecules want to go, but it's where they're needed, and that is why it's going to take energy. So basically, when we talk about active transport, what we're saying is that our molecules are going to move against the concentration gradient. What that means is they're going to go from where there's a low concentration to where there's a high concentration. Again, the molecules don't want to do that. They don't want to go to where there's more of them, but sometimes we need that to happen. And so that's what happens with active transport. So we're going low to high in this case. There's three types of active transport. There are various protein pumps that happen in the cell that allow our bodies to do different things. There is a process called endocytosis, and then the opposite of endocytosis is exocytosis. So endocytosis, the cell is going to be taking molecules in, and exocytosis, the cell is going to be releasing molecules from the cell. So we'll take a quick look at each of these in turn. Starting with the protein pump, this animation here is showing you this process. These red molecules are amino acids, and the cell needs to get the amino acids out, and so it was pumping them out of the cell, even though there was already lots of amino acids on this side of the cell. The pump was still pushing them out that way. Another example that's similar to this is a sodium-potassium pump, which is very important to nerve responses, and is going to be switching sodium for potassium in order to basically make the electrical currents that your nerves need in order to work properly. Because the protein is changing shape in order to push the molecules against their concentration gradient, that is why there is a requirement for energy. Okay. The next type of active transport is called endocytosis. In endocytosis, we are taking materials into the cell. So endo means in, and cytosis, or cyto, means cell. So we're going into the cell. This does require energy because you actually have to change the shape of the cell membrane. And anytime you have to change the shape of the cell membrane, it is going to require energy to happen. Basically what happens, the cell membrane is going to infold around a food particle. So here you can see an actual cell. This is its membrane right here, and it's actually wrapped around this much smaller cell. Here's just a kind of a graphic of it. So here's a molecule, and here's a big cell, and you can see it just starts to kind of fold itself around that molecule. Here's a white blood cell going after another cell that came to the body. Here's another little picture of it, kind of showing it grabs it and pulls it in. So it kind of looks like the cell is eating if you look at these pictures, right? Food's on the outside, now it's kind of grabbing it and food bringing that in. Once it's in, the food, you're going to form a food vacuole, and then whatever came in there is going to combine with the lysosome, and you will digest that product down until you can use all the parts of it. Okay, so this is how a white blood cell will eat bacteria. So here's a white blood cell going after bacterium. It actually sucks the bacterium into the cell itself and then breaks down that bacteria so it doesn't make you sick. Okay. The opposite of this is called exocytosis. In exocytosis, we're going to force material out of the cell in bulk, in large amounts. And this graphic was at the beginning of the very first podcast. Here we got a large amounts of material inside a vacuole, and it's fusing with the cell membrane here, and it's getting pushed out of the cell. So basically, the membrane surrounding the material fuses with the cell membrane, and it basically spits everything out. The cell is changing shape, so this is going to require energy in order to happen. An example of this would be hormones or waste getting released from the cell. So if you think about, like, say, your pancreas has to make insulin, your pancreas has to make enzymes. It's going to make all of those things, and then when there is a need for them, they get released from the cell in bulk. A whole bunch will get released all out at once. Basically, exocytosis looks like endocytosis in reverse. Okay, so those are our 3 types of active transport. All of them are going to require energy, and they tend to be moving molecules from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration.